40 million poor in the United States. Is it the end of the United States? Welcome to Geopolitics Today, your trusted source for a deeper understanding of our ever-changing world. 40 million impoverished in the United States. That's right, among developed countries, it's the country with the highest number of people living in poverty. Just to give you an idea, Brazil has 13 million people living in poverty. The United States, 40 million. But hold on. Before you start criticizing us in the comments, listen to my analysis. Because that's what we're going to discuss in this video. The United States has a larger population than Brazil, with nearly 400 million inhabitants. Moreover, being poor in the United States is different from being poor in Brazil. Why? What is considered being poor in the United States? In general, because the United States is a heterogeneous country. You have very different economic characteristics in the Northeast, the Central region, as well as other regions. It's like having different countries within the United States. A family living below the poverty line in the United States is considered to be a family that resides in a rented house with 4 people and has a family income of less than $34,518 per year. So, you add the income of those 4 people, and if it reaches this value or below, the family is considered poor. Comparing that to Brazil, if you take this $34,518 and convert it to Brazilian currency, which is roughly 5 times the value of the dollar in relation to the Brazilian real, we'd have an income that would fit a middle-class family in Brazil. So, these are very distinct proportions when determining if a population is poor in Brazil compared to the United States. But when did the number of people living in poverty start increasing in the United States? Was it before the pandemic? During Donald Trump's presidency? When did these numbers begin to rise? If we look back at recent history in the United States, during the real estate bubble crisis, a significant portion of the population changed their social class. We had a boom in poverty, but then the US economy recovered, and 2 years before the pandemic, there were signs that this indicator was on the rise again. Okay, but what are the causes of this increase in poverty in the United States? There are 2 causes, one social and the other economic. First, let's examine the economic aspect because it's easier to understand. Back then, President Donald Trump used to talk about America first. However, the fact is that the United States lost millions of jobs to Asian countries with the advancement of globalization. One of the characteristics of globalization is outsourcing. What does that mean? It means an industry leaving the United States to produce in China, in special economic zones, or in Cambodia, Vietnam, or other places in Indochina. This resulted in unemployment in the United States, employment in those countries, and profits for large companies. But this directly impacted a segment of the US population, namely those without qualifications, who were in low-skilled jobs earning their salary. However, since they no longer have their jobs and cannot find employment, they fall into the cycle of poverty. Without a job, they rely on the government to survive, leading to various welfare programs. The United States is the country with the highest number of welfare programs. To give you an idea, during the pandemic, the United States spent more on welfare assistance than the GDP of small countries. So, we have a decrease in low-skilled jobs. Another factor was the decrease in wages. This wage decrease occurred due to the weakening of labor unions. That's right. In the 1970s and 1980s, the United States had very strong unions that advocated for workers' rights. Today, we have very weakened unions in the United States, which have been struggling not only during Barack Obama's presidency, but also during Trump's and Biden's administrations. As a result, there's no longer a discussion about salary adjustments based on inflation or the country's economic growth. This was another factor that significantly impacted the increase in poverty in the United States. Another issue affecting the entire world is technology. Technological advancements are replacing low-skilled jobs. So, this is another economic aspect leading to an increase in poverty. Now, let's talk about the social aspect, which concerns the behavior of US citizens in society. In the United States, there's a culture of loser. A loser, in the United States, is a person going through financial difficulties. They're labeled as someone who doesn't work as they should, who lacks skills, a person without value. Someone who made wrong choices in life, and it's their fault for being in that condition. This perception also extends to the government. The government doesn't expand affirmative policies as it should because they see these individuals as failures, simply because of that. So, to the government, these individuals should pull themselves out of the hole they got themselves into. This is the loser culture. You've probably seen it in movies. This social issue isn't just increasing the number of poor people but is also leading to an increase in crimes like theft in the United States. In some states, stealing even a few dollars isn't considered a crime. We can also mention the rise in gang-related activities. As we mentioned earlier, the number of poor people is rising, and this leads to an increase in criminal activities. There's also an increase in drug consumption. The United States is the country with the highest drug consumption in the world. And now, there's the infamous zombie drug inside the United States. Take a look at this image. Look at the condition people are in. And all of this is a reflection of the increase in poverty. Is this poverty the same for everyone? Is it the same for poor white people, poor black people? I know that in the United States, there's a division among three groups: whites, blacks, and Latinos. Is it all the same? No. This poverty impacts blacks and Latinos much more and whites much less. One of the main issues when we talk about poverty is when it affects children, because children will grow up in an environment that isn't conducive to their development when there's a lack of money. We live in a capitalist world. So, without money, it's difficult to move up the social ladder. In terms of numbers, while 11% of white children are below the poverty line, this rate rises to 26% for Latino children and 32% for black children. Look at those very high numbers for a country that is the world's greatest superpower. This leads to racial inequality, and inequality is increasing in the United States. So, you have a middle class that can still sustain itself and the country through consumption, and then you have these marginalized individuals. What does it mean to be marginalized? It means being outside the cycle of consumption. Marginalized individuals are those who cannot afford a decent quality of life, including healthcare, education, security, and housing. So, a marginal is someone who is excluded from the capitalist process. Remember that in the United States, you have to pay for everything. Visit a dentist in the United States, and you'll see how much they charge you. If you can't afford to pay for a doctor, will the government cover it? It depends. But now, we're curious to know. What do you think? Are the United States going through this period of instability and likely to recover soon? Is it already showing signs of recovery? Or are the United States digging their own grave, transforming into a country with severe social issues? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your opinion. Thank you for spending this time with us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell to stay updated on our upcoming videos and to stay informed about the current geopolitical landscape. We've also handpicked these videos that we recommend you watch next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.